Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we're going to be making chicken noodle soup and some ham and Swiss melts using our sourdough bread. So we're going to start out by, I've got my pot of water boiling. We're going to be using chicken thighs. Chicken thighs make for the best soup broth. So I'm going to be putting them in my boiling water and let them cook up while we prep the rest of the ingredients for our chicken noodle soup. And with the chicken noodle soup, your broth is going to be the star, so we're going to be using some different herbs to really give it a lovely broth. Turn this up, and I've got my chicken in there. Now we're going to give a good helping of some sea salt. Sprinkle it around. And some ground pepper. I'm going to use about, I want to say, a teaspoon of ground pepper, 2 bay leaves. And what I like to do with my bay leaves is I'm just going to give them a quick crunch, and this kind of allows the flavors to seep out a bit faster. And let me get my chicken bouillon. So we're going to cook our chicken in some chicken broth. It just gives it a more rich flavor. So let me get a big spoon for that. So you could use straight up chicken broth for your chicken noodle soup if you wanted to, or you can use some water and chicken bouillon. So I'm just gonna do a big scoop of that. We'll give it a nice little stir, and we're gonna let our chicken thighs simmer. And this is going to be the chicken and the broth base to our chicken noodle soup. And then we'll make some ham and Swiss melts on our sourdough bread that we cooked up the other day. Okay, let's prep some of our vegetables. So I've got, I was like completely out of onions today. So I've got a little bit of a red onion, celery, some green onions, fresh parsley, thyme, and carrots, as well as my frozen noodles. So we're gonna prep them to put in there with our chicken. I'm gonna do kind of a small dice on this, and then I'm gonna actually put the lid on my pot, just partially off, and let it cook. That will help the chicken cook a little bit faster as well. I had to dig out my bigger Le Creuset pot. This Le Creuset pot is actually one of the first ones I got. It was probably in, I want to say 2006. I bought it on eBay. I was a poor college student, so I found somebody was selling it, and I got it on eBay back in 2006. So that's been around the block for a while. We've got our onions diced up, and then I've got my celery. I've already washed it. I'm going to use the leaves of my celery. The only thing I'm not going to use are my really big stalks at the bottom, simply because they're larger and they don't have quite as much flavor. So I'm just going to cut off that in part, and then we're going to kind of do a nice chop on all of our celery. This is going to give a really lovely flavor to our broth. I'm just doing a pretty thin slice down it. There we go. And this is about 6 stalks, including the leaves of celery. I like to use the leaves in it. I think it adds a nice color to the broth, as well as the lovely celery flavor. The leaves have just, you know, a little bit more delicate, but have a good amount of flavor in them. Okay. And we're gonna toss these in with our chicken while they're cooking, so that the chicken for the chicken noodle soup will get nice and flavorful from the onion and the celery. There we go. Put it all in there, and then I will give it a quick little stir. Can already smell it. It smells so good. There we go. And we're gonna let that simmer and let those chicken thighs cook. And now we're gonna prep our carrots.
Oh, you have a question? What's your chopping block made from?
This one is just a good old-fashioned plastic one that I've had around forever. I have some wood ones, but I just prefer my plastic ones over because the wood ones are just so hard to clean, especially if you're chopping meat. So, I mean, I typically use my plastic one for meats, and then I have it right here because it's just easier to clean. I do not like metal chopping blocks or like the stone ones because they dull your knives really easily. And I just find wood is just so hard to clean, and I go through a lot of wood ones. So this is just a good old plastic one, and I just give it a good scrub after each use in there. But I've had it forever, and it works. I even like melted it once, putting it next to my grill. But I know there's like lots of controversy about like the microplastics in plastic cutting boards, or you should use wood, but then the wood you can't sterilize as well. And then you gotta oil them. And then like the deep gashes can like get bacteria in it. So, and then if you use like a stone one or a metal one, they dull your knives. So there's just, I feel like it's hard. I think people should just pick whatever they feel most comfortable with, and then use that. But it kind of looks fancy. There we go. Give this a nice chop down. We're just kind of doing a thin dice on our carrots. I'm just using some pre-washed baby carrots, but if you were using whole ones, I'd be using about 4 whole ones for our chicken noodle soup, just because they're kind of the star of our chicken noodle soup. Of course is the broth, but it's like carrots and celery, and then the noodles and the chicken. So it's kind of more of a simplistic soup, but if you make a great broth, it'll be absolutely delicious. And that is our goal here. So we've got our carrots, and we're gonna add these. Looks like we've got a big simmer on it, perfect. And then we'll turn it down just a little. It's a good thing about when you're using a Dutch oven, it really retains the heat well. There we go. And every time you add a vegetable to it, it's gonna bring the temperature down just a little bit, and I wanna try to keep a good simmer on it. We're gonna add our diced up carrots here. And then we'll prep our herbs and spices, but we're not gonna add them yet. I like to add them towards the end of the soup because they can kind of let their flavors out quickly. But for our green onions, I'm gonna add part of our green onions into the soup now, just the stalks that are a bit thicker.
Got a question. For Dutch ovens, what brand do you use?
Most of mine are Le Creuset, but I've been collecting them for years. I know they're more expensive, but I do love them. But I think it's because that's what we grew up. My mom had Le Creuset pots, and then she gave me some. I've gotten through time, or sometimes Le Creuset stores will have like a big sale, and they have outlet ones that you can get them cheaper than.
And how many do you have?
20 or so. I have a lot of Le Creuset pots. I have them like every size, and then I have some specialty ones. I have like a tangine, I have a Le Creuset wok, some different frying pans. But I've been collecting them over years. Like I said, this Le Creuset pot I got in, I think, 2006 when I was in college. I ordered it off of eBay, so who knows, it's even older than that. So just taking up until I don't see any of the whiter parts of my green onions. The other parts I'm gonna save to put in at the soup towards the end. If you have leeks are also a great addition. I typically love to use leeks in them, but I didn't have them today. We give our broth a nice stir. I'm gonna let it kind of cook up. It smells very wonderful and fragrant. And that's coming from the celery and the green onions. Okay, we're gonna prep the rest of these that we can throw in. I'm gonna just do kind of a chop up of these, the finer parts of the green onions. The reason why I don't add these in now is because they're not as thick and they're more tender, which means they will wilt a little bit faster. So I add them towards the end to kind of keep their nice texture and their flavor. Got
a question. So quite a few people are interested in Dutch ovens. What would you suggest for someone's first Dutch oven? Like, what would you get the most utility out of?
I would get probably a 6-quart one. And like Target has, I will say, like, you don't need to go fancy. They're very similar. For a reasonable price one, I feel like Target has some good ones there that are very reasonable price. I love it when it's called Hand and Hearth. It's like, what is her name? Joanna Gaines. She makes like a nice Dutch oven that you can get there. And I don't know if that's a 6 or an 8 or a 7 quart, but those were about the good sizes that you can. You don't want to get too big and you don't want to get too small. And I mean, hers is like, I feel like for her Dutch oven, it's like $50, but I have a couple of her other products. I got a cast iron baking dish, and then I got mini Dutch ovens from her. And they have worked out really well. The trick is when you get a Dutch oven, you can't put them in the dishwasher because, of course, they're made out of cast iron. And they also have an enamel coating on them, which means you need to either use wood utensils or plastic utensils in it. You can't use metal because it will scratch the enamel. And then if you scratch it, it will rust. So you kind of, that's like the trick with it. But
and you have a question. Can you use them on a glass top stove?
Yes, this is actually a glass top stove. So yes, you can use them on glass or with gas. So an electric is just fine. And so I've been using a glass top stove forever, and it works great. Induction, I don't know if they work on an induction because it has to be certain metals work with induction. And I'm not sure if they work on that just because I've never really used an induction one. I have an induction hot plate, but I only ever use like a sauce pot with it. So I know electric works fine in there, but you don't have to go super fancy in the beginning. The nicer brands that I do like that are more expensive is Staub and Le Creuset. But again, those are bougie and they don't cook any different than your $50 one that you might get, as long as you're using the right like care with it.
Someone's fairly certain they work on an induction. Yeah, I would assume. I mean, it's just an enamel coating, but
yes, and it's just the thing. I mean, some pans don't work on induction though. I have metal pans that I'm like, oh, this is a metal pan, it should work, but it doesn't. So it's just, I would think it would. But I've been surprised which pans didn't work on induction for before.
You should bust out the hot plate one day.
I know, I should bust it out and try it. I will say the only reason I know this is when we had to remodel our kitchen 2 years ago. My mom was like, here's a hot plate you can use. We turned our office into a kitchen because we had to rip out our dining room, our kitchen, and our laundry room. And we didn't have a fridge. So I cooked everything in like a pizza oven, a crock pot, an Instapot, and a little hot plate. And some of my pans did not work on an induction. So it was strange which I had like pans I could use. My all-clad worked, but my scan pan did not. So I think it depends if it's,
Got a couple more comments. They do work on induction.
Okay, perfect. See, that's what it's great when people chime in and leave in comments because you know what? Unless you have it, it's a hard question to answer. And it's not something I've done a lot of research in because I don't really use induction. But induction is great for boiling water. I will say I missed that. I could boil a pot of water, and then when I got this new stove for our youth house, I was like, something's wrong with it. It's taking forever to boil. And I realized induction does heat it up a lot faster. So we minced up our parsley, we minced up some fresh thyme, and we've got our green onions. So this is about, I want to say, that's probably 1/4 cup of fresh parsley, maybe 2 tablespoons of fresh thyme, and I would say 1/3 cup of green onions. We'll add that. We're gonna let this cook and simmer, and then we're gonna be using some home-style noodles for our chicken noodle soup. These are the best noodles ever if you don't have time to make homemade noodles, which is hard. So you get them in the freezer section, and they don't get soggy. So they're called Reams, home-style noodles. They are the best. Not every place carries it. Target carries it, Publix carries it, and I think Kroger, outside of those chains, I don't know, but not everywhere carries it, and sometimes they don't have it, and it makes me upset. But these are my go-to to keep in the freezer. Love them. Let's start on our grilled cheeses. So, we made, was it last night? Yeah, last night we baked up our sourdough breads, And so we have it. This was our spinach feta that we made the other day. It's so good. You can see the little feta chunks in here. And then this is our good old traditional one, so that we're gonna be using for our ham and Swisses today. So I'm gonna cut and get, there we go. So we got our first slice, and then be a big ham and Swiss. But what is better than to dip your grilled cheeses into chicken noodle soup? So we've got our ham, or that one for me, and then we're gonna cut this for my husband. But apparently whoever cut this bread last night did not do a good job. So I'm gonna even that out, and we'll save that for some toast later. There we go. So this is my traditional sourdough. I do believe I have that recipe card posted.
Yep. And there's a comment someone was talking about, you can use the Dutch ovens for sourdough. It's actually what you use.
Yes, I use my Dutch ovens for sourdough. I don't have a fancy sourdough pan. I just use my Dutch ovens, and I have an oval Dutch oven, which I use for my loaf ones, and then I have my rounds, which I use for my round pans.
And what size are those?
Oh, I would have to say, I think my one I use is a 6 or 7 quart. I have to go through because Le Creuset has numbers on the back of them. And like this is, well, this is so old it has letters, which is an F. But I think they're like a 28 or something like that, which is, they measure it by length of your diameter versus the amount. But I believe it's probably a 6 or an 8. It's somewhere between 6 and 8 quarts. And that's what you want because it's big. Because you don't want to have it in too small because you need it to really puff up for a standard size loaf. Okay, let's get our butter on here. We're going to put a little bit of room temperature butter on one side of the sourdough bread. And again, I only butter the bread. I don't put any butter on my skillet. This just prevents it from like the butter burning on, because if it's not on the bread, the milk fats will burn in it.
There's a comment that Angel uses the 6 quart for her sourdough loaf.
Yeah.
And it makes good sized bread.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said, I'm pretty sure it's the 6 quart, but I have 6 and I have 8 and I have 4 and 5. I have like every size, so I'm not 100% sure which size I use because it's like I use my green pot or, so I'm pretty sure.
Okay, and then you have a question. So if it's just for one person and I make soups and chili and eat on it like 3 to 4 days or freeze, what quart size do you think I need?
Well, if you're making it, so even though it's one person, but you're making a bigger batch to save extras, I think a 6 quart is like your standard size one. I believe 6 quart is the standard. So I think that would great. The only problem is if you do a smaller one, if you do a bigger batch that you do freeze, you can run out of space easily. I think this right here is, I want to believe is an 8 quart. And so I would have to think.
What's your big chili one?
My big chili one, I think, is like 20.
Yeah, that thing's huge.
I have a huge Le Creuset pot. I got it on sale. It was a going out of business thing. So this pot is normally like $700 and I got it for $125. It was like the best thing. So back to those things. Let's do our thing. We're going to do our ham and Swiss. So we're going to put a little bit of bougie mustard. I only say that, it's not really that bougie, but it's Grey Poupon, which my husband likes to believe was the fancy, upper class mustard growing up. And he always jokes that my parents always have Grey Poupon. I just think it's just a good standard plain mustard.
Not all of us grew up with live-in chefs.
Yeah, okay. So I had a more privileged upbringing than my husband, and he likes to point that out. I always say he married up when he met me, and he should be fortunate that I'm a great chef. But we are going to put a little bit of mustard on here. Even if you don't like mustard, it actually pairs so well with the Swiss cheese and the ham. You don't really taste it. I actually hate mustard, but on my ham and Swiss, I will put it on. And you don't want to use a yellow mustard. Yellow mustard is got a it's just not the right flavor compound. So you want to use either like a Grey Poupon or Boar's Head has one that is more of a like mild color looking. And if you really love it, you could do those seedy brown mustards. And then we're gonna put our Swiss cheese. So I find the mustard helps with Swiss cheese. I don't think Swiss cheese has much of a flavor, in my opinion, but some people absolutely love it. You're gonna layer it on here, and we wanna make sure that we don't have our cheese kind of go over, because then that will just melt down and burn on our skillet. We don't want any burnt cheese. So here we go. It's very holy cheese. And then we're gonna put a thin layer of ham. I'm just using deli meat ham, but you could use, if you have like the thicker cut ham from like those, like you get the spiral ham, you could use that as well. There we go. Let's get this in here. You don't want to overload with your meat, because if you do, your cheeses won't melt, and that would be sad. So we're just gonna do a nice thin layer. I can hear the woodpecker outside. We have a couple like juvenile woodpeckers right outside, and it's a beautiful day here in Tennessee. It's like, what is it, 65? Yesterday we got up to like 75 degrees, and it is lovely, but I can hear this woodpecker, and I realize it's gonna annoy me for the rest of the year as it's pecking for bugs in our tree right outside our house. But it's cute. We went out there and my husband's like, that's not a woodpecker. And I'm like, no, it's a juvenile, it's a baby. You can look at its coloring on its back, and he's gonna get bigger and louder. We've got our next layer of cheese, and I wanna make sure we match it up. And remember, I did put a thin layer of mustard on that side of our bread. And we're gonna turn on our skillet. I'm gonna start it off with a slightly higher temperature just to warm up the skillet, then we'll turn it down and we'll crisp. Let's head back to our soup. We've got it cooking. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can grab one of my chicken thighs out with some tongs and see if it's cooked all the way through or not. So I'm just gonna grab this, and then I'm gonna use my knife and give it a quick cut in and see. You know what, these are just about done. Maybe like another minute or so. So we'll put that in there. Okay. We're gonna get my egg noodles ready. So I'm just gonna show you these, why I love these. So they're not like your flimsy noodles that you put in there that get soggy. They'll puff up just a little bit, but they're so much better. And while we are waiting for our things to cook, I'm going to feed my sourdough so that we can make a new loaf of bread tonight. If you've never made sourdough before, or you're thinking about getting into it, you need to feed your starter about 6 to 8 hours before you are gonna use it, because you need it active and bubbly. So I like to feed it now for dinner, but I have my 2 sitting right out here. We're gonna feed both of them, because I always like to have going. And you want to use unbleached flour to feed these. So we used ours yesterday for, what did we make? Oh, our snickerdoodle cookies. They have been such a hit. The kids, I hadn't made them in a really long time, and they're like almost all gone. And I did give about a dozen or so to my father-in-law, and he loved them. Okay, let's start. Let me find.
You got a question? Did you discard first?
I'm going to, this one I have hardly any, so I'm not going to discard from that one. This one I'm just going to give it a small feeding, so I'm not going to discard it because I'm going to use a recipe. We're going to make a couple loaves and I want a lot. So. But
you used them, and that's why you're reading.
Yes. So so yesterday, as you can see, it's in here. So I used it yesterday and I just forgot to feed it. So I'm going to feed it now, and I don't need to discard it because I don't have. The reason you discard is because if you do keep adding to it, it's going to keep growing. So you discard so you don't have a massive amount. I'm going to put 10 in this one because this one's pretty low. So 10 tablespoons of unbleached flour, and we'll let it ferment. And then this one I'm just gonna put in 5 because I don't need to create that much more. 5, 6.
And do you know what type of loaves and what's for dinner?
7, 8. I gotta, okay. If I don't, I'll mess up counting 9. I can't multitask that way. There we go, 10 and counting. So I'm gonna make a traditional loaf as always because my husband loves the plain and I'm like the bougie, I love it. And then I was gonna make a sun-dried tomato and basil loaf. Let's check on my grilled cheeses real quick. So I put 10 flours in there, 10 tablespoons of flour, so we'll add 10 tablespoons of water. Good, they don't need to be flipped yet. And then I'm gonna add 5 in here because this one, I just used a little bit from it yesterday. I think tonight I have some beef stew meat, so I'm going to make something with that. I haven't decided yet. I do need to go grocery shopping. I've just been pushing it off. I've been enjoying the weather outside. It's so nice. I went out and I gardened today, did some weeding, did a lot of planning for our summer garden and what we're gonna plant. Okay, so I put 5 in here and 10 in here. I like to use milliliters instead of using it out. So 10 tablespoons is equal to 150 milliliters. So I'm gonna put 150 milliliters in here and 5 is equal to 75 milliliters. Much easier. Okay. Got my thing. So 150 in here because a tablespoon, if you didn't know, is equal to 15 milliliters. So we keep it easy, we do base 10 math. And then 75. Perfect. And we'll give it a good stir and then we'll cover them up and then they'll be ready to make our loaves tonight, which is perfect. I used to only have my smaller jar when I was making sourdough bread, but I realized I made so much that I overused it, so we upgraded to a bigger one. Got that one mixed up. I think these are ready for their first flips. Perfect. The nice thing about these is you can hear them starting to crackle. And this is, we're gonna do 2 flips. The second flip is for the nice golden crust. The first one is really to get the cheese melting. Okay, so I've got this guy stirred up. And before I stir this one up, I know these chicken thighs are nice and ready. So I'm gonna get out a baking sheet and we're gonna take them out and transfer them there to let them cool for a second before we discard the meat. Now the trick is when you want them to cool faster, is to pull off the skin right there, because that skin acts like an insulator and will keep them really hot until you do. So I like to pull them off there because I don't buy like skinless thighs because I feel like the natural, like the fat that is in the skin adds just great nutrients and flavor to the broth that you can't replicate. Like a boneless, skinless chicken breast, they just don't cut it when you're making homemade broth for your soups. So we're just gonna pull it off. And that way the chicken thighs will cool so that we can shred them in about, I would say, not even 5 minutes. They don't need that long to cool. So just pull them off. And there, let's see. I think I have them almost off. There you go. It does not want to come off. Perfect. And do I have any more in here? Where is Waldo? Not there. Okay, now we have our broth is nice and hot. We are going to add in our noodles. Put in a whole bag, and they will puff up just a little, but they'll be nice. Okay, now we're gonna do our golden crisping on both sides now. So like if you make a big batch of this chicken noodle soup, you can eat it in like a couple days and your noodles will still be a good texture. Okay, we've got this guy fed. Let's stir this one up and then we'll put our cheesecloth over the top of it. If you're new to sourdough, you need a cover on the top of your things while it's fermenting on the counter. Cheesecloth works the best because it allows air to go in to it, and if you otherwise, you'll trap the natural fermentation gases if you like completely seal it. There we go. And these will be nice and ready to use to make our homemade bread tonight. So you can even see how this one's I just fed it and it is already starting to get bubbly. And that's what you know is a nice active starter. So it will be ready and perfect and fermented for tonight. So we'll make our traditional loaf, which is a super simple recipe, and then we'll make our sun-dried tomato and basil. Put those on our counter. Let's give this a quick stir. And then let's check on our grilled cheeses, see how they are progressing. Almost ready for their flip. Now I'm going to put in our herbs. So this was our fresh thyme, and that was about 2 tablespoons or 1.5 tablespoons of fresh thyme. This is about 1/4 cup of fresh parsley, and about 1/3 cup of the green onions. We put the base of the green onions in sooner, and this is just to make that broth extra lovely. And, okay. Give it a nice stir. And now we are going to do our chicken shredding. So, these will be a bit hot. I'm pulling off all of those skins, so the skins are going to be discarded unless you have a pet. Dogs love chicken skins. I'll tell you that. That's a good treat for them. Okay, let me go. I'm going to grab a fork real quick. We're going to start the shredding. So, it's easy. You just kind of pull apart and you just pull it off while it's hot, and it will come off. If you have those fancy shredding gloves, you could use those. But again, who has that stuff? But I think our grilled cheeses are ready for their flip. Perfect. Oh, lovely. Look at this beautiful golden brown crust. I'm gonna rotate it because this side gets a little hotter. And we're gonna shred this chicken up, and when this chicken is all shredded, we can throw it in, and our chicken noodle soup will be done. Now you can use, a lot of times I use shredded rotisserie chicken. But again, for the best broth, chicken thighs are where to go. Sometimes I'll use like a pack of chicken thighs with a split chicken breast on there, like the one with still the skin on it, because that also is adds a bit more meat bulk to it. But the chicken thighs are just the natural fat in them just adds for a more velvety, rich flavored broth. Okay. Get these guys off, and we'll shred them. When my son is here, he's always like, "Ooh, can I have some chicken?" As I'm like shredding. He loves just like boiled chicken. The key is to make sure you have a good broth, a well salted broth going, so that your chicken has a nice flavor to it. So we cooked it in, we had some sea salt, pepper, bay leaves, and a little bit of chicken bouillon in there, and that just allows for the meat to get a nice flavor as it's cooking, as well as making the broth the star of this show. There we go. Pull in there. It's not too hot now. That's why I said the trick is to peel off those skins. That just helps them cool so much faster. We'll peel this off. And beautiful. I can hear my dog snoring over there. It's so funny. They're so little, but our dogs, even though like I think she's 15 pounds, she can make a lot of noise while she sleeps. Those are our 2 cavies. We rescued her, I think last year, 2 years now we've had her. Oh, she was such a sad sight when we had her. She was like so skinny and her hair was so ratty, and she has made like a full like 360. She's just so beautiful right now.
180, 360
backstory. Yeah, back
so.
to the thing. One whole thing, you're right. Hey, you know, geometry was never my thing. I was more calculus and algebra. Geometry and trigonometry were not my jam in school. There we go. Let's check on our things real quick. Perfect. These are almost done. We're getting that beautiful crust on it. Okay. Let's get these shredded up so we can serve our lunch today. And I think I'm gonna eat it outside because it is so beautiful outside today. Again, I was doing some yard work, and then my 3-year-old was so excited. I found some grub worms as I was weeding, and they were his pets all morning. He played with them. He had to sit next to them as we did a picnic outside. We had them in like a little bucket. You know, they get so fascinated by little things like that. I mean, it's cute. I'm just happy that we can go outside and not be stuck in the house. We've had a couple cold weeks here, and now finally some nice weather. Okay, we've got all of our chicken thighs shredded up here. So we're just gonna toss this right into our soup broth. Beautiful. And then I am going to wash my hands, and we'll be ready to plate up in just a second. Okay, let's look at these. Beautiful golden crust. Beautiful. Perfect. Get my soup cauldron. We'll serve mine up. I had mine on the spinach feta because I like it bougie. I'm actually, this will probably be enough for 2 people to eat. And let's give our soup a quick stir, and then we will ladle it out. But the beautiful part about this is that the fresh thyme and the parsley and the green onions just add such a delicate flavor to the broth that really elevated over like a canned chicken noodle soup. Okay. It smells wonderful. Let's see if I can find a noodle to show. See these the noodles. They just are so beautiful. Perfect. So here is lunch today. Chicken noodle soup with a ham and Swiss. Okay, let me cut into our chicken or our ham and Swiss so you guys can see the beautiful melt and a nice crunch on it. And I always say grilled cheese, it's sometimes better to go low and slow. So you've got that, look at that beautiful melt on the Swiss cheese. And delicious. Well guys, thank you for joining us. We try to do live cooking shows every single day. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us for more cooking activities. I think tonight we'll make our sourdough breads, and we're gonna be doing something with beef stew meat. So I'm gonna be creative and think about that. But again, thanks for joining us.